Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode on SAP UI5 and FIORI training. In the last episode in UI5, we discussed about the binding mode and we started with the first type of binding type called property binding. We observed that we can bind any property of a UI element with our input field or any other property, for example, enabled or visible. We have binded the property of the JSON using curly braces and the address of the property. Once the binding is done, the data is automatically picked up from the JSON model or the model which is in concern, and then that data will be available for the user to be able to see or to be able to react according to the binding which we have done. Since we have done all these bindings with the property of the element, it's called property binding. If you similarly do the binding with something called an aggregation of a UI element, then the same thing becomes something called aggregation binding. We're going to see some examples for the same. Now let's move on to the next binding is expression binding. Now let's go back, and what we try to do is create some more input fields on the screen. So I will come back. And now we can see here there's an input field. Now some of you were also asking about structuring the content what we have a little bit more nicely. So how can we do that? So for that, first of all, I'm going to use a new control called simple form control. Now guys, the simple form control actually comes from a library called sap.ui.layout.form class. So we have to just use maybe form F. I'm going to just give an alias name. And anyone, where do we have to define the alias? Please answer in chat window. Where do we define all the aliases related to the XML view? Where do we do that exactly? Anybody? We do that on the top of the screen in the view section. Here is where we are doing our aliasing, correct? So let's go ahead and add this alias. So I'm just going to say XML namespace, and it's a form class which comes from SAP UI layout .form. Now that's a very nice practice, and together with that you see the library here is SAP UI layout. Always make sure when you put a library, ideally you should also add that library in the bootstrapping. Okay, so let's go back to the bootstrapping, and here you see we just mentioned SAP M. We forgot to mention SAP.UI.layout. Now guys, coming to the first funda fox of today's class, very important. Whenever you're doing aggregation binding, again I repeat, whenever you're doing aggregation binding or a more complicated type of binding which you will see sometime later, you must have to define something called binding syntax as equals to complex. Again I repeat, whenever you're doing expression binding or a more complicated type of binding, you have to define binding syntax as complex. What we need to do is funda fox, whenever we need expression binding, we must tell SAP UI5 that we are doing special complex bindings. To achieve the same, we must provide bootstrapping code called SAP XX binding syntax equals to complex. It's not real complex thing. It's just a syntax which we have to tell in the bootstrap of UI5 that, hey, UI5, please allow us to do such a complicated binding. You can also just, if you're confused and a little bit of it, you can always go to UI5 SDK and documentation and check the binding syntax, complex binding, example of binding different types, binding syntax, and then we can actually check that binding syntax should be complex. Okay, it's not showing it up here. Just quickly just do this. XX binding syntax, SAP UI XX. It's SAP UI XX binding syntax. S is capital. Be careful. S is capital. SAP UI XX binding syntax. S is capital. Now, guys, what is that I will do now? I will not add this intentionally. Now, I told you just now that it's important. You must have to put. You have to tell UI5 that we're going to do this. Yeah. And now intentionally I ignore it. Let's see the behavior when we ignore this intentionally. Okay. It's not going to work. Now coming to expression binding. What is expression binding? Many times we need to create, or we need data to be supplied to model, to UI control based on some condition. We want to apply or supply data to the UI control based on some condition. Suppose if this then that, yeah, if this then what, right, else what. So always you may come across a condition, conditional binding. Yeah, it's actually conditional binding where you want to give a condition. You want to say if this is the case, then please do that. Now guys, in JavaScript is another style of writing if condition. What is that style of writing if condition? That style is called expression, JavaScript expression, where we can have, so the syntax for expression binding would be a JavaScript expression style. So we should say like this: curly braces equals to means whatever we're doing is now not a normal binding. It is an expression binding. Normal binding, it was just curly braces. Now curly braces equals to means please evaluate this expression. Yeah, it's not a natural binding, it's an expression binding. And now inside this we have to give an expression. Expression, you guys are all know what is an expression. It's actually like if two variables are matching, not matching, greater than, less than, all these things are expression. So expression, then in JavaScript if, so typically how do you write if condition? If expression, then you write your code set 1, whatever code you have, else you will write your code set 2. So typically you may return something, let's say y, and here you may return something, let's say x. Something may y and something may say x. So this is your expression. So something you may return x and something you may return y. That's your if expression, x or else return y. That's what you must have to do. So now similarly same expression in JavaScript will be written like this: if question mark my return whatever x colon return y. This is the expression, guys. So whatever you're writing here in if condition, exactly same thing in a JavaScript style can also be written into an expression like this. Is that clear to everybody? And the Curly braces equals to indicating that it's an expression binding. And now your expression, whatever if else, if it comes to true state, it's going to execute this piece of code, return that value, and that value finally goes to your UI control. So your UI control is equal to writing an expression. This value which you're returning is going actually to the UI control. This value is then going to the UI control actually. If else then what? That's what this expression exactly doing. So you can also check on UI5 SDK. You can come back and check here expression binding, and you can find lots of syntax. You can see equals to expression, colon equals to expression. Yeah. And now in here you can see there is some expression. Okay, there is a small correction I think we have to do in this expression. We have to just add colon first and question mark later. Let me just check that. Colon first and question mark later. No, we are correct only. Question mark and then colon. So what is that I've written? Yeah, correct only. Question mark, written x value and y value. Now let's see how expression can be written. Expression may sometimes you would like to use some other value from your model. Okay. So when you want to use, you can have a simple expression 1 equal to 2, 2 equal to 1, whatever your hard-coded values. But many times the expression means data from another model property, which I will show you an example, don't worry. In that case, we use dollar parenthesis and the path of the property. That's what we will use. So many times the expression which you're writing would need the value. It would need the value from other JSON property in the expression. In that case, we can use dollar curly braces in the path. That's what we have to do. Let us go ahead and now see how this can be achieved. Let us go ahead and see that. So what I'll do is I'll come back, and now what I will do is I will give an example. But before that, let's complete our model. So now here, what I'm going to use is simple form. And in this simple form, we're going to add our label and input field. Guys, the beauty of simple form is the moment you put a label control, again I repeat, the moment you put a label control, it automatically starts from a new line. Yes, yes guys, you don't have to take care. Many of you have come to me asking, Anubhav, what if I want to start my input field from a new line? Use simple form control. Very powerful control. The moment you put a label inside an aggregation of simple form. So now we are defining aggregation. The content is an aggregation. So guys, for giving aggregation also you have to use the namespace for this and content. That's very, very important. Don't miss this up. Simple form has an aggregation called content. Now this is a default aggregation, which means you can ignore writing this line. But if you are writing this line, don't forget to mention this F also, namespace also, because the content here is an aggregation of simple form which belongs to SAP UI layout form class. Similarly, its aggregation must also be in the same namespace. Okay, so let me note down this as a funda fox. So when we are writing a control with its aggregation, the aggregation also must belong to same namespace as the parent control. Yes. Clear everybody? This is clear to everyone. Like in this example, simple form has content aggregation. Hence we use one class before both of them. Very important. You can see it here. You can ignore it also. Why you can ignore? Anyone? Why can we ignore content aggregation, writing of content over there? Why? Go to API reference, check out simple form, civil layout form class, go in there and just see. Perfect answer. Yamini has given me the right answer because it's default aggregation. Yeah, it's a default aggregation, hence you can ignore writing that. System understand default होता है ना, अपने आप पिक हो जाता है. What is the meaning of default? English meaning of default, something which gets, if you don't give anything, this will be considered, boss. So if you're not giving any aggregation, you can ignore it completely. Default is content. अंदर जो भी डालोगे वो content में चला जाएगा, क्योंकि content default aggregation है, right? It will automatically move to content because content is your default aggregation, right? So now coming back, I'm putting it so that you guys can understand this concept of putting namespace also in front of aggregation. It's बहुत important है. Many of you miss out. They simply put content. वो देखते कि ये कंटेंट है. अरे भाई कंटेंट किसका एग्रीगेशन है? ये तो देखो, कंटेंट इज एग्रीगेशन ऑफ सिंपल फॉर्म. उसका नेम स्पेस क्या है? एफ है. So you must have to put F also over here, guys. Very, very important. Okay. Now let's write input field and label combination. So just put label, and then it may give you a confusion like ये HTML लिख रहे हैं हम लोग. It may give you a confusion like we are writing HTML. Some people start writing inside this username. No, guys, it won't work. This is XML view. You have to use the property. Label is a UI5 control. उसका text property use करना है हमको. Then only the label will come. And I'll say, let's say username, and say employee name maybe. And then I'm going to use next label. The moment you use label, automatically new line gets created in simple form text. And then I'll say maybe employee number. I would love to put that first because that's the right order. We have our in JSON also. अच्छा लगेगा, order वैसा ही रहेगा. तो employee name, just give an input and give a value property. And just come here next label. अब copy paste कर सकते हैं. So let me create two more. And now I just say employee name, employee salary, and currency. And let's do the binding. You see the value property binding with employee name. Right now this is incorrect. Let's go to the model data. क्या property डाला है? Employee number. This is my employee number. EMPNO, salary and currency. EMPNO, e-name, salary, currency. That's what I want to pick. Employee str से. So EMPNO, e-name, salary, currency. EMPNO, e-name, salary, currency. EMPNO, Please mute your line. Who's this? Can you please mute your line? I would again repeat, please mute your line. Can you please mute your line? Mad, can you please mute your line? Okay, let's move on. /empstr/salary. And then now let's put here currency. Let's put that up. So now that's my binding. Watch out on the UI. Abhi expression binding nahi kiya hai. Till now I've not done any expression binding. It's just a simple property binding we did. Okay. Right now just a simple property binding. We are moving slowly towards expression binding to show you an amazing example of expression binding. And guys, in real time world also you may come across such use cases where they ask you to do expression. They will not tell you कि expression binding करना है. You have to choose that you have to do expression binding. And you see now we got the value, and you see a switch works for everything which is binded to enable. Why my switch is only enabling disabling first field? Anybody who will tell me why my switch is only working for first field? Who will tell me? Anyone? Why my switch is only working for first field? Anyone? Why my switch is only working? Because the binding was done for enabled property with the first one itself. You see, enabled property was not connected to Alia with the multiple fields. Is that clear, everybody? You see, a labeled property is only and only connected to this. It's not connected to this at all. That's why it's not working. थोड़ा सा code देखना आपको, and then it's very easy to handle the things up. Yeah. Now guys, I want to do something nice. What I want to do, I want to say if my employee name is Anubhav, okay, listen to me carefully. If employee name is Anubhav, make the salary automatically 5,000. Clear? Again, I repeat my example. If the employee name is Anubhav, make the salary 5,000 and disable the input field. Wow, क्या example है. Many times in real world also, when you go to projects, you will get such requirements. अगर ऐसा है तो ऐसा करो, right? If the employee name is Anubhav, make the salary to 5,000 and disable the input field. Grayed out the input field, please. That's what I want to do. Disable or gray out both are same. Read only भी same है. Read only करना है या disable करना है, grayed out करना है. So that's the requirement. Clear, everybody? So watch out this requirement carefully. Read this carefully. Condition. What is condition? Employee name should be Anubhav. This is condition. Make the salary as 5,000. This is second requirement. Third thing, third line, disable the input field. So means which field you have to work with? Anybody? Which field you have to apply binding on? Now यहाँ पे answer maximum गलत दोगे आप लोग. Let's see how many of you can give right answer. Which field you will apply the binding? Perfect answer, Uday. We will apply binding on salary. On this field we will apply binding. Which are all the properties of the salary field you will be applying the binding on? Which are all the properties? First will be the value property of the input field because the value has to be 5,000. And second will be the enabled property of the input field so that it can be disabled. So I am now, ये simple काम नहीं चलेगा. If you simply do the binding, will it work? If you simply do the binding, will it work? It won't work. It's a conditional binding now. You need a condition to perform this. That's why it's called expression binding. So let's go back and see. We have to write an expression. What will be our expression? Let's first finish it off here. If employee name is equals to Anubhav, that's my expression. Then return the salary value as 5,000. Else return the value, whatever you value have, which means dollar curly braces slash empstr slash salary. I have to return that value. That's what I have to do. Yeah, this is what exactly I have to do it. And then let's put endif. Now, how will you write this in a JavaScript expression way? You will say equals to curly braces equals to मेरा condition क्या है? I have to check employee name. If I want to take a value from my binding, I always have to put dollar check if e slash empstr slash ename is equals to Anubhav, single quote. If it is Anubhav, question mark, please return false. I'm right now talking about enabled property. Enabled property false हो जाएगा. Else return enabled property is true. Since it's return, you don't have to mention return. You just have to say what value you want to return. Because you see, this is repeating. JavaScript is smart enough to understand ki boss, it is a returning thing. So remove the return, not required. Okay. And that becomes your expression. किसी को कोई doubt, anybody, any doubt in writing this expression, if condition is converted to this expression using JavaScript syntax now. Using JavaScript, this if condition is converted to this. Any questions, anybody? Yeah. So dollar sign means I want to read the value from your modal. So there is a modal where there are so many properties. So you want to read the value for employee name from the model. And user input is done on the input field on the screen. And if user writes Anubhav, that value, since the two-way binding is getting changed in the model, we are reading the model and we are saying this expression. If expression goes true, it returns false to the enabled property. Input field will become disabled. Clear, everybody? Are all of you clear? So let's go and achieve this. So watch out, amazing stuff. What happens on the system? This is called expression binding. Okay. So now let's come back and now we'll see employee salary pay karna hai. This is the salary field. And now first we'll do with enabled property, makes it relatively easier for you to understand. Enabled property equals to curly braces equals to. This means I am writing an expression boss now. It's not a normal binding, I'm writing an expression. What is my expression? Dollar Anubhav wala input field. So take the value from the model, read that value. So dollar this whole thing. This is your employee name. If employee name is equals to single quote Anubhav, then question mark return false, else return true. That's what we are doing. That's my expression, guys. Hope it is clear to everybody. Enabled property में क्या जाएगा? False चला जाएगा अगर employee name अनुभव हो गया. जैसे ही false जाएगा, enabled property will make your input field read only. Watch out this now on the screen in action. Let's come back to the screen. And now I'll just refresh it up. And now I will write the employee name as Anubhav. Let me just write it. But still, you see, it's not working. Though the employee name was Anubhav, it didn't make it disabled. What went wrong? Anybody? What do you think? Why my expression is not working? Though actually the employee name is Anubhav, still this is not working. Why? Why? Anyone? Perfect answer. The moment I started this topic, I told you there is a binding syntax called complex. अगर वो नहीं डाला कितने भी expression लगा लो कुछ नहीं होगा. Right? Did you get it? Many people, they start writing expression, they write beautiful expression. पहली बार में accurate expression. And then they say, Anubhav, my expression not working. I tried so hard, full day I wasted, it didn't work. Did you listen to the session carefully? You did not listen to the session carefully. If you would have listened to the session carefully, you would know that I have to go to index.html and there I have to mention to the UI5, hey UI5, SAP UI binding syntax, XX binding syntax equals to complex. ये नहीं डाला तो कुछ नहीं हुआ. SAP UI5 won't even understand that you are allowed to do expression binding. Believe me, it took one complete day. When I was learning, I missed out the syntax. And I was crawling internet like hell that night. And it took that whole day and night for me to crack this up. ये इतना सा line. Okay? It won't work until you tell UI5, hey UI5, we're doing expression binding, we're doing complex binding stuff also in our code. Let's come back, refresh the page. It's still not working, then it means something else. Let's come back and just put a space. I think we need a space. No, this equals to is absolutely fine with it. There's no problem. So this one equals to my expression. That's my expression. Question mark false, question mark true. Let me put a space here. Could that be the reason? And it should be enabled property. And just make sure in F12 there is no issue coming. There has to be no issue related to your code. This issue is normal, cache buster and language issue, that you can ignore it. That's not a big issue. That's not at all issue. You will guys know this later. But right now, just let's refresh. It's still not working. There's something wrong. Something we are doing terribly wrong. Because of that, system is unable to explore it. Let me try with just single equals to, double equals to as a comparison operator, not triple equals to. Let me try that up. No. So something is wrong. Maybe right now, guys, just to test this expression, I'll not compare it the name. I just put 1 equals to 1. That's the expression I'm putting. It should always return false to enabled property. Yeah. Let's try this how we can test. At least expression binding is working. You see, expression binding itself not working. No matter what expression you're putting, it should become false. It's not becoming. There's something we are missing. Something we are missing for sure. Let me also make sure cross check if this we have put which is correct syntax or not. So let's say go back. I think it's data hyphen. I mean data hyphen, guys. Data hyphen UI hyphen XX binding syntax. Usually all the coda which writes with data hyphen. Guys, I missed data hyphen SAP UI XX binding syntax. That's why it's not working. It should start with data. You see, observe the pattern here. See, सब कुछ data से start हो रहा है. Data SAP UI theme, data SAP UI leaves, data SAP UI resource routes. So ये कैसे data से नहीं चालू होगा मेरे दोस्त? ये भी तो data से चालू होगा. Data SAP UI XX binding syntax. Let's give it a try. मेरा hard coded expression एक बार चल गया तो इसको I can replace with actual expression which I want. So let's check it now. And सब कुछ ही चला गया. Okay, good. Everything blasted. At least something has happened. And now you see it's saying instead of equals to, expression binding equals to this. So there's something going wrong with the expression. And now I think we have to put here the triple equals to and put a space between operator and operand. That's normal practice. Refresh. And it's hitting debugger. And voila, can you see, guys? With that expression, my input field always becomes grayed out. And now bring it on my actual expression, which is to checking the employee name. Instead of 1 equal to 1, I now paste back my actual expression, which was saying, hey, if the employee name is Anubhav, return false, else return true. Save this up, come back, refresh, employee name Anubhav by default. You see input field is grayed out. Wow, guys, wow. What do you think? What is the best way to test this now? Imagine you are end user, you are not developer. What is the best way to test it? What do I do now to test if it works? Change the name. Wow, so simple. Keep simple things simple, guys. It's not that complicated. Come and change the name. Acha, किसने आंसर दिया? Who answered correct? Vivek has answered correct. So let's put Vivek here. So I say Vivek. Let's enter. Boom, there you go. You can see the input field has now become enabled. Vivek, thanks to you, ये लो. इतना हो जाए तुम्हारा salary. I pray to God that इतना तुम्हारा salary हो जाए और zero लगा दो. This should be your salary, Vivek. Good answer, Vivek. So that's what I put now. You can see I had put the name, and the moment I put the name, input field have become. अभी देखना, मजा देखना. अनुभव बना देता हूँ इसको वापस. I make it back Anubhav, press enter. Voila, you see it has become grayed out. Lock कर दिया इसने input field को. That's called expression binding. What an amazing concept. Many times in your company, you will be asked to do something based on something else. Yeah, all of that can be achieved with simple expression binding. If they are asking you complicated expression, yeah, In that case, you have to go with something else, which I will tell you a little later. But right now, this is a very simple expression binding. You can see a lot of syntax on UI5 SDK always. Go and check that up. There are a lot of variety of expression. You can also use regular expression for pattern matching. If employee name starts with A, if employee name starts with A, B, C or something, do this. Yeah, like that you can do it. Okay, that's the beauty of expression binding. So that's now still our requirement is not complete. You have done half requirement. Disable हो गया है. अगर employee name is अनुभव, disable कर दिया है. What is the next requirement? Salary should become 5,000 if this is the case. बहुत easy है. You are hard coding the salary यहाँ पे. Write the same expression over there. Copy that. Bring it on, boss. If the employee name is Anubhav, please return 5,000. Else return जो salary value binding से आ रहा है. How do you write existing JSON binding value? Anyone? How do you write existing JSON binding value for salary? How do you write existing JSON binding value for salary here? How do you write existing dollar symbol, curly braces, and wo value? EMPSTR. You guys have understood the expression binding. Okay? You understood the expression. So if Anubhav, employee name is Anubhav, make 5,000, else make whatever value is there in the JSON model, wo leke aa jao. Let's save this up. Watch out now. Let's check some data what we have. So in the data, if you go back and check, we have salary 5,000 ये यहाँ पे, इसको मैं 15 lakh बना देता हूँ. I make it 15 lakh rupees, and now I just come back 15 lakh euros, and I'll just come back. Watch out. If the employee name is Anubhav, you see salary is 5,000. Though in the salary binding, in the salary property of EMPSTR, it is 15 lakh. Expression binding is prevailing. It's taking higher priority, and it is made salary 5,000. Agar name Vivek kar diya, voila, you can see salary is actually coming out from the model, and input field is ready for input. Clear everybody this example? How can we achieve this example? Very interesting, very amazing example, expression binding. Let's move on to the next type of binding called binding for aggregation. So aggregation binding is another powerful binding in which you will not bind the property. So by far we were working with the property, guys. So if you just come back and check here input field, I'll just go to please. Yeah, let's go there. And now what I'll do is I'll just go to properties. You can see we were using editable property, we were using enabled property, we were using the value property. So these properties we were using for binding. So that was because they are all belongs to property section. अगर मैं aggregation को bind कर दिया, that becomes aggregation binding. Example for that, a good example for that is table control in UI5. Let's go and check the table control. So we will right now use SAP UI table library. So just come down, SAP UI table library we're going to use. In this we'll use the table control. So sap.ui.table.table control. That's what we are using here. SAP UI table library .table control. Okay, let us go and create a table control on the UI. So I just come back to the screen, and now let's go back and to the view, and that's my simple form. उसके ऊपर एक छोटा सा table control लगाएंगे. Let's do that. Namespace is very important. So XML namespace for table library, I just say P equals to sap.ui.table control library. Sorry, table library. And now don't forget to mention that here that you got to load this library also. Yeah. And now just come back, write a table. I'm just writing P and my table control. An empty table control right now I'm writing. Empty table control. Let's come back to the UI refresh. Maja aane wala hai. Wow. Can you see an empty table is created? Wow. Do you see that, guys? An empty table has been created. Are you all guys clear? What do you need to fill data in the table? Anybody? What somebody would need to fill data inside the table? What somebody would need to fill data? You need columns, right? And you need rows. Keep simple things simple, guys. Don't complicate. Don't complicate. Kitna easy answer tha. You just need columns and rows. That's all you need. So let's see what the documentation has to say about it. So go back to documentation table and I see properties. और property में किधर भी column नहीं मिलेगा. Because column is what? Anyone? What do you think columns are? किधर भी column नहीं मिलेगा property में. They are just table properties. What do you think? It's actually aggregation. Columns is an aggregation. Similarly, rows is an aggregation. You see, rows is also an aggregation of type this object. Similarly, column is also an aggregation. Columns. Yeah, it's a default aggregation. What is each column is of type? 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 What is each column? It's a type of SAP UI table column class. Column class का type है sir. This is the type. ये देखो ऊपर लिखा हुआ है. कितना simple है. Column is actually of type SAP UI table column class. It's a default aggregation. So, however, I'm gonna mention that so that you don't get confused later on. So, it's of type column class. So let's come down and I'll write T columns. Inside this now we're going to write column. So again it belongs to which library? Let's go and check. It belongs to UI table library only. So go inside, check this class, column class. This is the aggregation, guys. Aggregation, you remember I taught you aggregation in previous units when I taught you basics of OOPS, where we saw inheritance and aggregation. Aggregation is always another object coming and sitting inside one object. So table object is aggregating columns. Yeah, it's a loose coupling. That's why, since it's a loose coupling, when I designed table initially, I didn't even put columns. It still worked. The table still appeared on the screen without putting column, right? Because it's a loose coupling. अगर tight coupling होता तो table dump करता. Table would have dumped if it's a tight coupling. This is a loose coupling. Table still existed without column. Now coming back, so let's check the column class. This is our column class. It has properties. The column class itself also has further aggregation called label aggregation and template aggregation. Okay, so let's try to understand how it works. So typically when you start, you have something called a table control. That table has columns. Yeah. So you have multiple columns in the table. Sorry, just have to draw that. So table has multiple columns and it has multiple rows. That's what a table typically has. So you have something called, where's my bracket? Here it is. So this is your columns. These are all your columns. And then you also have the rows, left to right. So these are all your rows of the table. Now, if you talk about each column, let's say column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. Each column which you see here on the top, each column what you see on the top here, this particular column, what you see here, column 1, column 2, and so on. Each column, what you see, it has two parts. One is column header. Let's see if this is correct. Let's go back to SDK. You can see label, sorry, label aggregation. So in the label, you can pass any control. You see, again, it's passing UI control, super class of UI5. How many labels you can pass in a column? Anybody? How many labels you can maximum pass in a column? 1, you can see cardinality is 0 to 1. It's an aggregation. Again, loose coupling. You can also have a column without label because a loose coupling is an aggregation. You can pass maximum 1 column as part of it. So that's my label. And now if you see below, you see a template property. Template aggregation, sorry. I'm saying property. No, they're aggregations. So what is template? Label will control the header, the text, or whatever you wish to put in the label. The header of the column. Now coming important part is template. Template of the column decides what type of column is this. Once upon a time, one of my students came and asked me, Anubhav, can I put a checkbox inside table? किसी ने ALV देखा है? Anybody? Have you seen anybody? Have you seen ALV in SAP GUI? ALV control? Can you put a checkbox inside ALV? Icon inside ALV? Have you seen icons inside ALV? Checkboxes inside ALV, right? That's exactly what we're doing here. We are telling the system, hey system, can you please put this column as a checkbox, as a radio button, as a image, as a button. So you can add a button as a column. So each column, a button will be available for you to click. For example, this column I want to make a button. So ये सब जगह button जाएगा. इसीलिए आप इसको बोल रहे हो template. Template means you are telling boss what is the type of class, what is the type of element you wish to use to be able to make it clickable. You are repeating it. Yeah, that's the button exactly. So it's button. So now that's what the template does. Template property allows us to be able to click on it. You want to get radio button, you can put radio button, you can put checkbox. We'll see some examples, don't worry. We'll see that. So that's about my column. Inside the column, you're going to go properties and you decide, the template will decide what type of control is going to be. Let's go ahead and now add up the column as part of the table. I'm going to add column. Each column has label and template. Remember, column is an aggregation. Each column is of type this class and each column then has further aggregation label and template. Let's do that up. So I just come back to the coda and now I'll start writing. So this is my column section. Just put column. गलती मत कर देना. C should be capital. It's a class. जहां भी class name आ रहा है देखो. T should be capital. Table T is capital. This is aggregation. Columns is an aggregation. C is small r. Wherever golden rule, wherever you're putting a UI5 class, it should start with capital letter. This was the mistake which people were doing with the page object. Many of you were writing page object ka P small. That day also we saw in one example it was written small p. So it didn't work. So anytime you're putting a class name for a UI control, put it in capital letters, starting capital letter. If you're putting aggregation, start with small letter. By the way, you can take help from UI5 SDK. इसीलिए तो बनाया है UI5 SDK. UI5 SDK is the helpful buddy for you. This is your buddy. Buddy will always help you. This buddy will help you. You see column C is capital. Aggregation name, if you go, you see label L is small, template T is small. Yeah, that's why this buddy is for you. So column class, but that should also belongs to table namespace. That's my first column. पहले column में क्या क्या है aggregation? पहला aggregation है label. Label aggregation. Is that the one? Yes, that's the one, boss. The second is template aggregation. So let's put that. You can ignore label also. Directly you can, whatever you put that goes inside a label, but I'm just putting it for your understanding. Then you can say template aggregation. Is this clear to everybody? Our first column. Is this clear to everybody? Our first column. पहला column कैसे डाला हमने? Is that clear to everyone? Now it's time to put inside this label aggregation some control. I'm going to put a label control from M library, and then I'll just say text. I'll say my label is employee number. And template I will say it is actually a text view. It will display some text data to the user. Here everybody, column is clear to all of you or not? How to create our first column with giving the column type using template. It's going to be view data. Yeah, it's not a checkbox. It's a view, text view to display some data, and the label of the column, the header of the column. Is that clear, everybody? How to create our first column? You can come back and check. Refresh. You will see the first column. Oops, something went wrong. Who is your best friend? F12 is your best friend. Go and ask F4, and now you see an error. Failed to load SAPM text view. I understood. Sorry. It's not a text view. It's just a text. It's just a text. And just end the tag with the text. Coming back and refresh. And it should work now. There you go. You can see it has got an employee number. Employee number. So now we're going to add multiple columns. So one column is added. Time for adding multiple. Let's add up multiple columns. So I'm going to add 4 columns right now. Employee number, employee name, employee salary, and employee currency. Let's come back, refresh the page. I have replicated the same column, and now you see there are 4 columns: employee number, name, salary, and currency. Is that clear, everybody? How to create all the columns? Are all of you clear how to create columns? Any doubt? Okay, let's move on then. We created 4 columns. Data तो नहीं आ रहा है. Data तो नहीं आ रहा है. What do you think? Do I now go and manually add row one by one? Anybody? Do I go add one by one? Look at my JSON sample data. It should come from EMP tab. And now do I need to add 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever rows one by one? Guys, please answer. Do I need to add these rows one by one? Tomorrow, let's say 500 rows. Will you write 500 lines of code to add these rows? Will you write 500 lines of code to add these rows? Does it make sense? And then it becomes 1,000 lines. And then it becomes 5,000 lines. Will you write 5,000 lines of code to bind the rows? No, no. There has to be some way. And that's where the aggregation binding comes into picture. It's going to automatically bind. Aggregation binding, that's the magic of aggregation binding. It automatically binds. You just have to tell, this is your table. Okay. You have to tell the table, hey table, can you please pick the data from where? Anybody? Which entity set out of these two which you see on the JSON model, which entity set are you going to bind the table? EMP tab, perfect answer, very nice. And even perfect answer Geeta has given /EMP tab. Wow, Geeta, thank you so much Geeta for answer EMP tab /EMP tab, because that's the address. You see on the top, curly braces should come as a slash. Funda box of previous class, curly braces should come as a /EMP tab. Perfect answer Geeta. That's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to tell, hey table, can you please bind the records, the rows of the table automatically from here. Automatically idhar se bind kar do. Is that clear, everyone? Is that clear, everyone? Bind it automatically. That's what exactly we want. /EMP tab. We want to bind it. Automatically सारा data आ जाएगा. Again, अभी देखना मजा आने वाला है. It's fun. It's fun working with table. Let's come back and I'm going to say my table, rows aggregation. Watch out again. It's an aggregation boss. The name of the aggregation is rows aggregation. When you go to the table, you will realize there's a rows aggregation. That's why you're doing binding with rows. So come here and I'll see here something called rows aggregation. Rows ROWS. Let's come back. Rows equals to, and now it's curly braces to indicate binding /EMP tab. That's exactly the aggregation binding. Is the aggregation binding clear to everyone? What is this binding called? Aggregation. Why? Because rows is what? What is rows? What is rows, guys? Is this a property? Is rows is a property? No, it's an aggregation. That's why it's called aggregation binding. Abhi, what do you think? Will the records come? Currently the table is saying no data. What do you think? The moment I refresh, will the records come? Yes, they will come. Refresh and boom, there you go. Kitna records tha aapke JSON mein? Anybody? How many records your JSON employee tab has? Can anybody count for me? How many records in employee table you has? 4 records. Do you see 4 records are created? Yes or no? Do you see 4 records are created? But some people thinking, why Anubhav, this is not visible for me? Why the values are not visible? I can see, yes, you're right, Anubhav, there are 4 records. But Anubhav, why are these values only not visible to me? No, guys. These are values not visible, not just it's not visible to you, it's not visible to me too. The reason is the table is connected to EMP tab, but table doesn't know that which column will get data from which property. So each record has properties now, right? Each record has properties. Table does not know that, okay, table knows that, okay, I can take data, the whole table knows I can take data from here. But the columns, the childrens of the table, they don't know which property to pick from, right? The childrens of the table, they don't know which property to pick from. For them, we have to now do an property binding. We have to do a property binding for these childrens now. Then only these table childrens will know that it has to pick data from here. Now some people say that can we bind /emp tab /emp number? No, guys. No. You have to do something called relative binding. What is relative binding? The whole table is actually binding to EMP tab. अब EMP tab के अंदर जो relative properties है, these are relative properties of EMP tab. You just have to bind with these relative properties. That's why it's called relative binding, which means whatever properties you have inside EMP tab, just mention that in the binding. You don't have to put full path for /emp tab /something. Don't have to do that. Just bind this relative property to it. That's exactly you just have to do. Just do that. That's it. Nothing else is required. Now, guys, important point here to note this EMP number. Okay, I've done a spelling mistake also. I put extra O, but that's okay. Leave it. We can do binding. So now this EMP number should take data from this. EMP name should take data from this. EMP salary should take data from this. Currency should take data from this. So we have to take data from individual child elements. That's exactly we have to do. Okay, let's do that. So now I'm going to use this property and copy that. Let's come back here and then you see there is a text. Text was earlier empty. Curly braces to indicate a binding and EMPO and no. Whatever property name is there. What is this path called? It is called relative path, not binding. It's called relative path. Why it is relative? It's relative to employee tab. ये एम्प्लॉय टैब के अंदर है, इसलिए it's called relative path. Employee tab was main entity. Inside that there are sub properties in every repeating records called employee number. That's a relative path to the employee table. EMP or no, that's relative path. And now let's come back, refresh the page. You will see at least the data for EMP number is popping up. That's called relative path, guys. So you can see now employee number is picking data because it's a relative path. Are you guys clear what is relative path? Are you all guys clear what is relative path? Yes or no? Is that clear to everybody? The relative path. Yeah. Let's come back. And now we will just bind these other relative paths. MP name. And then we will just use here salary, and we'll use currency. The relative path inside the input tab, repeating records. This is a relative path. Please pick the data from relative path. Let's come back and refresh. You will see a table will pop up with data. Wow, amazing guys. That's what we wanted. You can see the table is now filled with data. Is that clear, everybody? I have done a mistake. You can see here also I put salary, so it's getting salary there. Let's come back, refresh. And now you see currencies are coming up. Is the binding clear to everyone? The aggregation binding, when we bind it, the table with the main entity, uske andar jo whatever childrens are there, those childrens are binded with the childrens of the UI element, which is table here. So that is called relative path, and this path is called absolute path. Interview question: what is relative path? What is absolute path, guys? Interview question. Interview question, guys. What is relative path? What is absolute path? So what is absolute path? A UI control which acts like a parent for multiple other elements, other UI elements. When its aggregation binding is required, we bind it with a path. This path is known as absolute. Always try to give an example, otherwise interviewer will get confused. Example for table control, we have rows aggregation. The path which we use to bind rows will be known as absolute path. It is relative path. नाम ही रिलेटिव है इसका बेचारे का नाम ही रिलेटिव है, रिलेटिव पाथ. ओके, इसका नाम ही रिलेटिव. रिलेटिव पाथ इज अ पाथ which is relative to absolute path. Used to bind the child elements, the child UI elements of the parent. Most of the time it will be a property binding. It could further be an aggregation binding, but more complicated cases. Most of the time, that's why I'm saying most of the time it will be property binding with child UI controls. That's called relative path. Is that clear, everybody? The relative path and the absolute path. Here, everyone, what is relative path? So in this example, we had parent control, child control. The columns were children's. The table was the parent. The table bounded to a path called /emp tab that became the absolute path. Its children's, its columns were bounded to the individual sub-properties or child properties. That has become a relative path binding. Here, everyone, it's not binding, it's called path. So absolute path usually binds to the aggregation, relative path binds to the property binding. This is a typical scenario which we see in most of the time. We're going to see this scenario. With that, it's a wrap on today's class. Let me give an exercise. So now, guys, let me see how many of you can complete. Employee name should become editable input field. 1 minute का भी काम नहीं है. This exercise I can finish in 5 seconds. It's a 5-second exercise, guys. Employee name in table must be an input field, and if the name of employee in table is changed to Victoria, then salary should become 1 lakh. Salary should become 1 lakh immediately. What a perfect example. It's a blend. It's a combination. It's a shake of three types of binding: property binding, aggregation binding, and expression binding. Let's see कौन करके लाके देता है. Let's see who can answer. इससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं बताऊंगा मैं. Real time में, in real time when you go to project, people also won't tell you this much also. They will say just कर दो. Okay. I am still considerate and giving you this much information. In real time, nobody give this information. You have to still just think and do it. And then they will tell whether you did right or wrong. Okay. So this is the requirement. No further discussion on the requirement. That's it. This is the requirement, very crisp and clear according to me. If you are not able to understand, give a try. Let's see if you can achieve it. I will anyway post the solution. I know I have one of my best students, Sridevi, into the class. She is completing almost every exercise, and I'm posting the solution of those exercises onto the training blog regularly. You always can go and download them, and you can see if you have done it correctly or wrong. You can see here. Most of them are posted by Sridevi. See, Sridevi. She completes it very fast. She's always the first one to complete. I know many of you, other of you are also completing it and giving it to me, but she is very professional. She immediately finished this exercise, and I get, before I reach office, I always have an email in my inbox. That's why I say Sridevi is one of the best students here in the batch. She is completing these exercises very fast. Speed is what I expect, guys. I just want speed. And people want speed. People want instant value. Do you remember the day you opted for training? And I remember at least majority of you, they say immediately video चाहिए. Payment करते ही video चाहिए मेरे को तो. तुरंत चाहिए, जल्दी चाहिए, जल्दी. When you are in speed, when you are in hurry, when you want instant value out of it, what do you think? What is your company expecting out of you? Your company is also expecting an instant value out of you. This is how the world is. दुनिया के पास टाइम नहीं है आज की डेट में वेट करने का. Everybody want instant value, right? This is what I expect from you back. When I give an exercise, I also expect instant results. And this is what Sridevi is giving me actually. Before I reach off in another 1 hour, 2 hours, she is giving me the exercise solution. That's why her name is coming first. कोई मैच कर सकता है तो मैच करके दिखाओ. एक बार मैच हुआ बस रमना का, उसके बाद कोई नहीं आया. Nobody have come. Only once Ramana has matched to the speed of Sridevi. Other nobody can beat her. She is like Formula 1. Okay. Immediately she starts working on exercise. And I'm sure, very, very sure, I can challenge you, at least she will be successful after this training. That is my assurance to her. Okay, let's come back. Any questions on the class? Anybody? Please feel free to ask a question on this topic, what we have seen so far.
Hi, Anubhav, Pawan here.
Yes, Pawan.
Yeah, when you are searching through the SDK absorb, like sap.m. table is also there. How is it is different from this table?
Right. So this is actually called responsive table. We will also discuss it has a responsive behavior, unlike the typical table. We will discuss this in our FIORI unit. Still, we are in the second phase of our course, UI5. So the moment we jump to the FIORI units, there we will also discuss SAP table. I'll show you some key features like demand pop-in. We have a lot of pop-in, demand pop-in. There are some features which we will discuss which are unique in this table. This is what makes it different from the UI table. It's a little heavy dose right now. We will reach to this table control and then we will discuss this in detail. We're going to write this table control actually. Also in terms of aggregation, if you see it doesn't have a rows aggregation. Now you will wonder, Anubhav, without rows how will it come? There's a different name of that aggregation called items. So items aggregation, ये तो columns है, columns तो होगा, but items aggregation what brings the rows for the table control. You will see easily at least 8 to 10 differences between this and that table. But let the time come, we will jump to this topic later on and we will discuss that. Okay, I will cover it also, don't worry, it's part of our course.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Anubhav.
Thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Feel free to ask, don't hesitate, there is nothing to hesitate here. You always can ask your question. It can be a stupid question, maximum people will laugh on you, but that doesn't matter, that gives you a learning. So go ahead.
Hi, Anubhav.
Yes, Raj.
Yeah, actually, I have a question. Whenever we are creating an input field, it will take a maximum length as much.
Okay. Yeah, we can control that.
When I was practicing, na, so I have found that it took a full page.
Okay. There are
So,
two
is there any way
properties.
which you can able to control?
So you are saying there is something called max length property which you had choose, but still the input field was occupying the full page. For that reason, you can use width property. I got your point. So you see in this example also, it's taking the full page. You don't want to take it full page. You want to take it less space on the page. That's a width property. So maybe I just come to employee number. I just put here for our input field. नीचे 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 सिंपल फॉर्म एक्सपेंड करो, यहाँ पे है ये रहा, जस्ट पुट अ बिट प्रॉपर्टी. कितना चाहिए सर? 30% ऑफ द पेज. लेट्स कम बैक and then you go employee name become 30% of the page.
Okay.
There is also max length which allows how much maximum it is allowed to fill. So maybe max length, I don't know which is max length or max value. I think it's max value. I say only 10 characters are allowed. You won't allow not more than 10 characters of employee name. Allow कर रहा है. It's just length, I think.
Max length, I think, is there.
No, yeah, max length होना चाहिए. Let's try. मैं भी भूल गया. Check SDK. Yeah, max length works. You see, it's no more allowing me. It's no more allowing me writing more than that value. So width is different, which controls the width. The control max length allows कितना character enter कर सकते हो. सब UI5 SDK में है सर. Okay.
Okay. And similar to Java, are we have layouts in the same?
Okay.
For displaying the content?
Yes, we do have layouts, and those who want to understand what is a layout, how to structure our content properly, you guys can watch my video on Anubhav Learning Series, free learning series for topics which I cannot include due to lack of time in our course. Or I always give a commitment to you guys that I will bring it on. So many of you, like this batch, I had a lot of students in the past batches, and they keep coming with new requirements, new things. Of course, I can't address that in the main course, because if I do address in main course, आपका basic रह जाएगा. That's why, due to lack of time, what I do is I post a video on Anubhav Learning Series. You see, here somebody have come to me past asking Git repository. Somebody have come asking Anubhav what is layout. So you see, I have a video on responsive layout. This is a good time, guys. You can go ahead and watch this video on Anubhav Learning Series, responsive grid layout. Very helpful for you to understand how to put the layout to structure your content properly on the page. Okay. Can you show how can we put two views on same page? We will do that, Vivek, little later. It's still far away story. We can actually do it immediately. I can show you. Just come back. You will see this index HTML, and you see my XML view is instantiated. Similarly, I'll instantiate my JavaScript view, and I name it as Anubhav 1. And this is my JS view. I'm going to say place at content. And let's create content 1. इतना easy है विवेक. थोड़ा सा तो कोशिश करो. Just try a little bit of effort. Now my both JavaScript view and XML view will be on the same page. Watch out. Come back, refresh. both your GS view. See, do you remember? Show power, kill me, that was the content of the GS view. Yeah, that was the content of GS view. So this is come. Yeah. Both your XML view at the bottom and GS view on the top. Hope that answer your question. How can you put multiple views? Just playing with the controls. It's up to you how much you want to play with controls. More you play, more you understand. Why spelling did not matter? Yeah, it doesn't matter because it's your property name in the JSON, whatever you have put. You see the property name is EMPONO. Spelling does matter. If I go and do binding with EMPNO, assuming that property name is EMPNO, nahi chalega. If I just come here and put EMPNO, it won't work. It is actually expecting the same name of the property there. Same name of property. यहाँ पे जो property है, same name has to be here. Otherwise it won't work. अब यहाँ पे अगर Spider-Man है, तो Spider-Man चलेगा. क्यों नहीं चलेगा? अगर this is Spider-Man, name matters. Name matters. अगर ये Spider-Man है अभी, वहाँ क्या डालना होगा? वहाँ भी Spider-Man डालना होगा. There also you have to put Spider-Man. So now if you come here, this EMP-NO will not work. If you come back, employee number नहीं आएगा. ये देखो गैप हो गया. Because now the property name is Spider-Man. Let's put Spider-Man. There you go, Spider-Man is coming. You can see. So it's just about the property name which you have defined in the JSON model. Based on the property you define in JSON model, same data will reflect accordingly. It's up to you to design your data model, your data format and data properties. Whatever you put, accordingly it will come. No? Just bring it back to employee number, the original one, and just change it here also, info on. Okay, it's a wrap on today's class. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow at the same time. Not tomorrow, on the Monday morning. Sorry for yesterday's class. I had to go somewhere urgently, so that I have to postpone the class. With that, it's a wrap. See you Monday morning. Have a nice day. Goodbye.